feet as it is on the screen. The book of Luke, the 10th chapter. Let's read. Beginning at verse 25, hear the word of the Lord. For all those in the chapel this morning and all those that are joining us by way of the recorded format, hear the word of the Lord for the sermon on the Lord's Day morning. And a lawyer stood up and put him to the test, saying, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? And he said to him, What is written in the law? How does it read to you? And he answered, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength, with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, you have answered correctly. Do this and you will live. But wishing to justify himself, he said to Jesus, Who is my neighbor? And Jesus replied and said, A man is going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among robbers. And they stripped him and beat him and went away, leaving him half dead. By chance a priest was going down on that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Likewise, a Levite also, when he came to the place where he saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan who was on a journey came upon him. And when he saw him, he felt compassion and came to him and bandaged up his wounds, pouring oil and wine on them. And he put him on his beast and brought him to an inn and took care of him. On the next day, he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper and said to him, Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, when I return, I will repay you. Which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell into the robber's hands? And he said, The one who showed mercy toward him. Then Jesus said to him, Go and do the same. This is the reading of God's inerrant, infallible, immutable, inspired, and holy word for the sermon on the Lord's Day morning. Amen. Let's be seated. The title is not just a simple title this morning. The title is very important for us this morning, Loving My Unborn Neighbor. Loving my unborn neighbor. Last week we explained and expounded this parable for its true meaning. And if there be anybody who didn't get that sermon, it's easily available online from last week. And this morning we want to continue a little bit into this, especially on the question being asked by the lawyer, who is my neighbor? As Christians, we believe and confess that every human being is created in the image of God, and therefore every human being created in the image of God is my neighbor. That's the first point we need to understand this morning. That even though we find that there are people we do not like in the world, people we may not want to talk to, people we may not want to associate with, but we must understand that every human being is created in the image of God, and therefore every human being created in the image of God is my neighbor. Your neighbor is not necessarily someone who lives next door to you and you're separated by a fence. They are indeed your neighbor. But so is someone on the other side of the world, in the remotest island, in the smallest village, in the big metropolis, wherever they may be. They are your neighbor because they are created in the image of God. And God is very clear when he says we are to love our neighbors as ourselves. The 100-year-old man today is our neighbor. The 10-year-old boy today is our neighbor. The child born this morning in Southmead Hospital is our neighbor. The baby in the womb this morning is our neighbor. In Psalm 127, we read that children are a gift from God. This is the neighbor that we have, separated by skin, by tissue, as the baby is carried in the mother's womb. A neighbor living next door to you is separated by a fence. A neighbor on the other side of the world is separated by a boundary, or by time, or by a time zone, or by language and culture, but yet they still are neighbors. And we have today neighbors in the womb of the mother who's also created in the image of God. And Psalm 127 says that they are indeed a gift from God. God has so created the woman that the womb is the chamber of safety. This is how God has created women. They've been blessed with the most magnificent way of conceiving life and carrying life and bringing life into the world. They call the womb a chamber of safety. A chamber of safety. It is also a chamber of growth, because it is within the womb that the baby grows into full term, where they pass from gestation period to gestation period until the child comes and breathes the air of this world through the birth canal. Not only is it the place of safety and growth, but we say safety in the sense of the child is safe and secure, held within the womb, protected by the mother. But in the larger sense, also protected by everyone around the mother. The unborn child is protected by the father, or the siblings in the family, or the extended family. The unborn child is also protected by the nation and by its laws in the nation. And so the child is protected within the womb. However, as we say that, man has been in the business of turning the chamber of safety into a chamber of death. Man is in the business of turning the chamber of safety and protection into a chamber of death. How have they done this? Well, in past times, men and women have tied ropes around their abdomen and belly of the women to try to terminate, kill, abort, take out of this world the young child that they're carrying. Men and women have consumed different concoctions of poison and all other liquid substances in order to kill the unborn child. People have thrown themselves down a flight of stairs, over a hill. Women have tried to rush violently their bodies into physical objects, that the physical object might meet them with violence and therefore kill the unborn child. And they've also in past times tried to insert various physical devices into the womb to remove the unborn child. Today, much of that still exists, but exists in the legal form in this United Kingdom and in the nations of the world under the name abortion, which has two really significant divisions in that abortion. It is a surgical abortion and a medical abortion. I am careful as we speak this morning for those of our young ones who are listening, but also importantly noticing that we cannot be unclear or not clear about what we need to communicate concerning our unborn neighbors. Abortion does take place today in our nation, as it does in so many nations of the world today. A surgical abortion is one which is where the physicians, with the permission and the consent of the mother and the father, would use a physical device, would firstly kill the child by inserting something like a saline solution into the womb to kill the child. The child would drown on the liquid, on the poison that's been given, and once sufficient time has been given for the baby to die, the baby is then removed from the womb, limb by limb, part by part, using a special surgical device. And the baby is then assembled on a kidney dish, a tray, where the physician makes sure they have all the parts and nothing is left behind. That is called a surgical abortion. A medical abortion is where a particular medicine is given. We say medicine, when we say medicine, we talk about medicine as being good for us, because that's what medicine is for. medicine is good for us, supposed to help us to recover. But they regard medicine here in the sense of that which terminates life. And so they will give a particular medicine to terminate life rather than to preserve life. And so we find that this particular concoction is given and the baby is terminated, is killed, and is passed out through the woman's body. This is called a medical termination, a medical abortion. As we begin to look at this, I am talking about things that many of you already know. The last time I addressed the matter of abortion in our church in a sermon was, I think, close to 6 or 7 years ago when we were in a hall in Patchway. This morning on the matter of the unborn neighbor is what it's relating to. I have not chosen this topic for any other reason except that it is related to our sermon last week. Are we loving our unborn neighbor? Jesus commands us to love our neighbor. Are we loving our unborn neighbor? Abortion, by all accounts, is not loving our unborn neighbor. Why? Because abortion, by definition, is the willful, purposeful, intentional termination of a human pregnancy. That's what an abortion is. It's a willful, intentional, diligent termination of a human pregnancy. Somebody makes a choice, decides in their mind, makes a decision to terminate the life of life in a human pregnancy. And this is the willful termination, the diligent termination. And by all accounts, any termination of life, any bringing life to an end. Termination means what? To bring to an end. So any bringing to an end of human life is murder. And the Bible is clear on that we should not murder. The Bible is clear to us in the book of Exodus, in the commandments of God, which we'll talk about in a moment, that we must not murder. Exodus chapter 20, verse 13 says, "You shall not murder." On Friday in the United Kingdom, this past Friday in the United Kingdom, over 350 of our neighbors were killed in the name of abortion. Over 350 of our neighbors. The day before, another 350 neighbors were killed. The day before that, another 350 or more neighbors. And the day before that, similar number. And the day before that, a similar number. The only day where our neighbors are not killed in this way is on a Saturday and a Sunday. Why? Because the facility is closed on those days. But the week before that, it's the same story, the same number, all across the United Kingdom. The average of our neighbors, the unborn neighbors being killed, is approximately in the region of about 350 or more a day. Our streets are flowing with the blood of innocent unborn neighbors. Our nation is drenched with the blood of our innocent unborn neighbors who have indeed been murdered. I make the case this morning that we are not loving our unborn neighbors. We are in fact hating them as a nation to such a point that we're willing to take their lives. Jesus says this, he says in this parable, you're to love your neighbor as yourself. As yourself. Is there any human being today who will give themselves poison to drink? Is there any human being today who will take a saline solution to kill themselves so that later on somebody can rip their bodies up one by one, piece by piece, and assemble it on a kidney dish? None of us would wish that for our lives. We would not want anyone to rip us limb from limb. We love ourselves too much that we would allow anyone to do that. To such a point, if somebody comes to harm us and to shove something within put a poison into our mouth, we will do everything possible to stop them from doing that. We'll block our mouth and we'll block our nose and we won't let them put an IV into us to insert poison into us. We'll do everything we can to stop them. When somebody comes with a device to harm us, like a knife or a gun or something to harm us, we do everything possible to run from them, that we may protect ourselves. And yet, I use the illustration, I use the truth here, that Jesus says, you're to love your neighbor as yourself. You wouldn't want to hurt yourself. And Jesus says, why then hurt your neighbor? And so we find here, are we loving our neighbors enough, the unborn neighbor? I say certainly not. It's an important message for the church. It's an important message for us to hear. And a lot of what you will hear this morning, if you've been out with me on the street these last few years, these things are very familiar to you. We have had hundreds of conversations on the street about this. The Bible is clear. Exodus chapter 20, verse 13. You shall not murder. God is clear on that. There is no reason to take human life. God says you are not to take human life. Let me drop this another one into you. Go with me to the left. Go to the book of Proverbs. And look at me in the book of Proverbs in the 6th chapter. And look at what God says here in the 6th chapter and in verse 16 of the 6th chapter. It says this in verse 16, Proverbs 6. There are 6 things which the Lord hates. So understand immediately here that the Lord does hate. God does hate. A loving God does hate. It is a holy hatred. It's not the sinful hatred of man or the sinful way man hates. This is the holy anger of God. And the holy anger of God is made manifested here. The proverb says there are 6 things which the Lord hates. Yes, 7 which are an abomination to him. An abomination is a hard word. It's a difficult word. It's a word that the world wants us to remove from the Bible. Homosexuality is described as an abomination in the Bible. And here, yes, 7 which are an abomination to him. And he goes on to list them: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood. And a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that run rapidly to evil, a false witness who utters lies, and the one who spreads strife among brothers. Each one of them worthy of a sermon on his own. I'll just pick 2 and gloss quickly over it because it's pretty easy to understand. The first one in verse 17, hands that shed innocent blood. What do you mean by hands that shed innocent blood? It means by human beings who literally take a tool, a device, a weapon, and takes the life of the innocent. Sheds the blood of the innocent. Kills, destroys the innocent. Any human being that takes the life of the innocent, God says, is an abomination. That he hates that, God says. Who's the innocent here? Who's the innocent? We make the case that the baby in the womb, our neighbor in the womb, is innocent. Now theologically, we understand that the baby in the womb is not innocent, but still innocent. What do I mean by that? Well, if you understand what salvation is, if you understand how every man born into the world is born a sinner, in a sense, then the baby is not innocent because the baby was conceived in sin, born in sin. Sin being what goes on from one generation to the next, from Adam and Eve. All of us are born in sin. Therefore, when we say we are born sinners. We don't become sinners, we're born sinners. So the baby's not innocent in that way. But what the baby is innocent is in the sense that the baby did not get a chance to act on that sin. The baby did not get a chance to act on that sin. So bringing the baby before a court of law in that way, the baby can't be proven to be guilty because the baby hasn't acted on anything. Baby therefore is innocent. And the Bible says that and the hands that shed innocent blood, we recognize that the baby is innocent. And then verse 18 says, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that run rapidly to evil. A heart that devises wicked plans. A heart that plots evil, some of your Bible versions might say. That comes up with the plan. What is the plan? The plan is this: young people, older people, the abortion statistics are clearly available for everyone to see online. They're available for all to see. I'm amazed at the young people in our evangelism who are so shocked about how they come up with this information. But yet it's the same young people who know how to access them, TikTok and every other kind of device and network and platform, how to get information. These are the ones who now seem absolutely lost that there's statistics available about who's aborting children, who's murdering our neighbors in the womb. It's very clear that the young people or older people, whoever they may be, when they indulge in the act of sex, this intimacy between a man and a woman, that the product and the consequence of that is a human life at conception. But their hearts are so quick to respond. Oh, we don't want this child. We don't want this baby. We don't want this. And they go on to describe it as an it and so forth and so on, because I'll come to that in a moment as to why it's not described as a baby but an it. But immediately when the person realizes that they're pregnant, immediately their heart devises wicked plans. The wicked plans of this baby is going to be a hindrance to my success, a hindrance to my prosperity, a hindrance to my university education, a hindrance to my progress in my business, a hindrance to my daily activities. I need to stop this. So what do? Their heart already runs rapidly towards evil. And our nation is providing in law how evil work can be carried out by erecting these structures in our city, by erecting these places in our city where one can run to commit these evil acts of murder, the taking of the life of the unborn child. And they're very quick to run there. They're very quick to do this. We need to get rid of the baby quickly. And so the heart is already devising the wicked plans. The feet run rapidly towards evil, that evil may be carried out. We must make it very clear that the sin of abortion is indeed evil. It is wicked before God. And killing and the murder of any baby is seen in the Bible as murder. But this murder that we know of today is not unknown in the Bible. Go with me to the left. Leave Proverbs for a moment and go with me to the left and go to Leviticus chapter 20. And I will see in Leviticus in chapter 20, reading from verse 2 to 5. This wasn't a matter of human sacrifice. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "You shall also say to the sons of Israel, any man from the sons of Israel, or from aliens sojourning in Israel, who gives any of his offspring." Who is his offspring? His offspring are his children. "Who gives any of his children to Molech." Who's Molech? Molech is the pagan god that men and women bowed down and worshiped before. So the text says, any man from the sons of Israel or from the aliens sojourning in Israel. So this is not just the people of God here. This is anyone who's associated with the people of God here. "Who gives any of his offspring to Molech shall surely be put to death." This is a serious crime before God. Shall surely be put to death. There's a death penalty here for killing the child, for offering the child as a sacrifice to Molech. "The people of the land shall stone him with stones." This is the way the death penalty should be carried out. Stoned with stones. Verse 3. "I will also set my face against that man and will cut off from among his people, because he has given some of his offspring to Molech, so as to defile my sanctuary and to profane my holy name." Now, that's pretty strong, but it's easy to understand. It's easy to understand. But listen, it goes a little further. Look at verse 4. "If the people of the land, however, should ever disregard that man when he gives any of his offspring to Molech so as to put him to death, then I myself will set my face against that man, against his family, and I will cut off from among their people both him and all those who play the harlot after him by playing the harlot after Molech." So God is saying, listen, not only am I setting my face against that person who gives his child, but I'm also going to set my face against those who disregard what the man has done. You've killed your child? Oh, don't worry about it. It's okay. No, God says, the man who says it's okay, I'm also got a problem with him. The man who ignores the fact that somebody's given their child over to sacrifice, God says, I'm not going to keep quiet about it. I'm also going to set my face against him and against his family. Really, that man is going to be cursed by God. And his family is as well. And so we find here in Leviticus, not only the sin of idolatry, that they're bowing down before Molech, but the sin of murder in the offering of their children to Molech. And why did they do that? You may sit there asking why. Why would they do that? Why would they give their children to Molech? Well, they gave their children as an offering for prosperity. They wanted to be prosperous. They gave their children as a sacrifice so that their lives could be prosperous. Listen very carefully to me right now. In this child sacrifice center, Molech, in the book of Leviticus, mothers and fathers gave their children to Molech because they, the mother and father, wanted to have a prosperous life. If we give our children, we will prosper. Today, the same child sacrifice takes place in the United Kingdom, in these abortion centers, by mothers and fathers doing what? Saying, we will give our child over to abortion so that we don't have to have the burden of raising this child, because our prosperity is important. You see, I have dreams. So they sit and devise their plans as they get together, and when they understand that they become pregnant, what do they say? Listen, I have had dreams. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to be a business person. I wanted to travel the world. I wanted to backpack across the West Indies or Thailand. I wanted to go do this and this. Now this baby stands in the way of my prosperity. So what do? I visit Molech. And I offer my baby to Molech. Molech is called Mary Stopes. Molech is called BPAS today. Molech is called the NHS today, where we go and give our babies away so that we could prosper. This is the sin here in the United Kingdom. Child sacrifice centers are provided by the law, by the government, that children can be killed legally in the United Kingdom right up until the 23rd week. Right up until the 23rd week of pregnancy. Why is the 23rd week important for you to understand? It's important for you to understand this, that right up from the 8th week to the 12th week, you can hear a heartbeat. You can detect a heartbeat. You can hear a heartbeat. From 8 weeks, between 8 weeks and 12 weeks, you can hear a heartbeat. You go to the doctor and the doctor puts a stethoscope. What does he hear? A heartbeat. When you go to an obstetrician, a gynecologist, they put the stethoscope, they hear a heartbeat. And yet in the right up until the 23rd week, you can legally kill our neighbors. You can legally kill our unborn neighbors in the United Kingdom. This baby in the womb, this precious gift of God, this one that is growing inside the mother, already is developing a respiratory system. Prior to the heartbeat being detected, it's already developing a respiratory system. It's already developing a nervous system. It has fingers with unique fingerprints that no man on planet Earth has the same fingerprints as that baby. Like you, when you were in the womb of your mother, you had unique fingerprints that no human being has ever in the world. It is a unique human being, never to be repeated, ever in the world. And what do we do in the UK? We are legally killing our unborn neighbors. Where do we as a church stand on this? Well, you already know where we stand on this, but let me make it clear for anyone who doesn't know and following by way of the recording today. There are 3 groups really on this matter. 3 groups on this matter. The 3 groups are, number 1, the pro-life group. The pro-choice group. Then you got the pro-life group. And then you got who we are. Abolitionists. pro-gospel people. So you got the pro-choice group, you got the pro-life group, and then you got us, the abolitionist group, which is really the pro-gospel group. And you might know that word called abolitionist. Well, let's just back up a little bit. A pro-choice, what are we saying? People in the pro-choice group are saying, we're for you making a choice to kill your child. And what is the choice they are promoting? They're promoting the choice, the decision of killing, of murdering. That's what they're doing. And very often when we're in the public square and somebody says they're pro-choice, I say, well, explain what that means. What is the choice that you're making? The choice that you're making is to take the life of the unborn child. And then there's pro-life. And in a way, we as Christians are for life. We are for the life of every human being. But we're not pro-life in the sense of how pro-life groups exist. Because there are pro-life groups that are not Christian, for example. They do not believe in God. They believe from a biological perspective that they need to do what they can to preserve and to maintain life within the womb. But they will not go as far as we would go concerning the preservation of that life. For example, there are pro-life people who believe, for example, that it is okay to kill a child because the child has been conceived in incest or rape. And I'll come to that as we get to the end. And we as Christians do not believe that child must be aborted. And we'll give you the reason why in a few moments. We're abolitionists in the sense that we want to abolish abortion completely. We believe there is no reason ever that man can come up with that justifies the taking of a human life. We believe there's no reason whatsoever. The pro-life group, like I said, will think, yes, we are for children, we do want to preserve life, but there are some reasons that abortion should be allowed. Therefore, we put ourselves in the category of abolitionist. We want to abolish abortion completely. We would like abortion to be illegal, not only in this country, but across the world. That nobody should be given an opportunity to take the life of a human child. Now, when we use the word abolitionist, you would agree with me today on the word abolitionist. So let me take some time to just rest on that word just a little bit. Abolitionist. When did you last hear the word abolitionist? Well, you heard it in school concerning the abolition of what? Of slavery. Of slavery. If somebody signed you up, if you're a Christian at that time and somebody signed you up and said, would you like to be an abolitionist against slavery? You would easily submit and sign yourself up and say, yes, I want to sign myself up to be an abolitionist against slavery. I want slavery to be abolished. It must not exist. And though some people might say, well, there's a reason why we can keep a slave, there's a reason why we can have a slave, but you will say, no, slavery should not exist for any reason. It should be completely abolished. And you would join people like William Wilberforce and John Wesley and the Christians of the time in the United Kingdom who moved spiritually because of the Word of God. They moved through the Word of God to demolish, to abolish slavery in the United Kingdom. They were regarded as the abolitionists. Guess what? They were Christians. Why? Because they believed that the black man and the white man was created in the image of God equally. And they moved through Christian conviction that no man can dominate another man, that the value of one man is equal to the value of another man. They found no reason why, when they looked, they said there is no reason for a man to take another man's life. Therefore, there are zero grounds for any man to take another man's life. There are zero grounds for any man to usurp the authority of another man. There is zero grounds for one white man to take control of a black man's life and say that he has no value and therefore I can buy him and sell him and oppress him and so forth. The abolitionists said there are no grounds for this. They didn't say, oh, there's a slight loophole here. For this reason we can allow slavery. Oh, there's a slight loophole here. For that reason we can allow slavery. They said, no. It should be completely abolished. And so the act was passed here in Parliament for the abolition of slavery. These abolitionists were Christians. It was Christians who brought about the end of slavery. Using the same principle that we are using this morning, that we are to love our neighbors as ourselves. The Christians made the point that the black man is not only created in the image of God, that the black man is my neighbor and I should love him as myself. He is not of less value. He's not some goods or commodity that could be bought or sold. He has value before God. He's the image of God. He's created in the image of God. And therefore, there are zero grounds for slavery. So the word abolitionist was used to describe them who wanted to abolish abortion completely. I set that point before you to make this point. So too, we as Christians today are abolitionists. We're making the case that there are zero grounds for abortion today. No reason for a child in the womb to be killed. No reason whatsoever. We find no loophole here, no small reason here, no gap here that it could be allowed. We stand in the historical legacy and heritage of abolitionists before us who stood on God's word and talked about the value of human life. Now, we make the case that there are zero grounds. Whatever you're thinking right now, whether you're in this chapel or watching by way of YouTube, whatever you're thinking right now, every one of those reasons is not a reason to take human life. When you go to court and you present your case for the murder of somebody, you can't say, well, he deserved to be murdered, or I want you to murder him because of this. The judge will say, no, there's no reason for you to take human life. There's zero grounds. You cannot get away. There's a punishment for you. Death sentence if you're in America or certain parts of the world, or a prison sentence for you if you're in the United Kingdom. Yet there are many cases made by sinful man, because we've read here in Proverbs 6 how sinful man comes up with sinful devices and plans to try to achieve his way. Yet many cases exist, or many cases try to be made by sinful man to justify this evil and not love the unborn neighbor. And they don't love the unborn neighbor by manifesting their lack of love, by killing and murdering the baby in the womb. It is not love, it is hate then really to kill someone. Hate really to kill someone. Can I just get my glass wipe, please? Wipe. Thank you. So what do they say? Number one, what do they say? Oh, this is not a human. You've stood with me as a church on the streets of Bristol. I've been all across the UK, so many towns talking about this. We hear this is not a human. There were people sitting in our congregation. I pray there's nobody here today that does this. There were people sitting in our congregation, young girls sitting in our congregation, who refused to acknowledge this. What do? Fought to their parents. We refuse to go back to Pastor T's church because this is what he's teaching. We want to have the right to have an abortion, really is what they were saying. As Christian children in the church, young black girls in our church were saying this. Left our church 6-7 years ago because I preached on this. And I said that there is no excuse, there is no reason for an abortion. Oh, but it's a clump of cells. What are they doing? They're borrowing from the world. They're not looking at the Word of God. They're borrowing from TikTok and from social media and other places what Meghan Markle says or some other person says or some influencer says, and they go by that. Oh, that person says it's a clump of cells. Well, in a way they're right, but not right in how their argument comes to a conclusion. We do indeed begin life as a clump of cells. It's part of the growth of everyone. All of us began as a clump of cells. But not a clump of cells that was dead, not a clump of cells that had no life. Life begins at conception. We begin ourselves in a way as a clump of cells. And if you're medically trained this morning, you know that process. That fetal development. What happens before it becomes a fetus and an embryo? What happens before that it's a zygote? What happened before that is called a trophoblast? And all of those processes you learn. That's the process of development. All of us have began that. So you sitting here today were one day a trophoblast. You were one day, a few days later, a few weeks later, a zygote. Then you became an embryo. Then you became a fetus. We all went through that. It's part of our human development. But when they say it's a clump of cells, what they're really doing is this. Listen very carefully. They're distancing themselves from a human being. That's what we're doing. When young people today, when people make their objection and say it's merely a clump of cells, what they're saying is it is a clump of cells. It is impersonal. So let's distance ourselves from this human being by calling it an it. And let's distance ourselves in such a way by calling it a clump of cells. It's not human, it's a clump of cells. It's not human, it's a clump of cells. What are they doing? They're convincing themselves that it's not human. What are they doing? They're dehumanizing the baby in the womb. They are dehumanizing the baby in the womb. And when you dehumanize the baby in the womb, you separate yourself emotionally from it, from the baby. You separate yourself mentally from the baby. You separate yourself legally from the baby. You separate yourself spiritually from the baby. It's not a human, it's a clump of cells. They distance themselves from their conscience about this. Their conscience tells them it is a baby. But when they begin to call it an it, they're distancing themselves from the child. And this is what the white man did over the black man in the matter of slavery. And not only white man over black man, black people did it over black people as well in slavery. I said this when I spoke about slavery, when the protests were going on in our city, and I said not just Black Lives Matter, but all lives matter. And I said this to our congregation at that time, even who were from Nigeria and Ghana in our congregation, and I said, no white man went into Ghana to take people as slaves, and the Ghanaian people said, you please welcome and take them. No people in Ghana said that. I went to Ghana, to the place of no return. It's a place. It's a hole in the wall where you go through and you go onto the ship. It's called the place of no return. When you pass through that wall, there's no way you're coming back. You've gone off to England and then to the West Indies and wherever else. It's one of the worst places you can visit. Because you could almost hear the cries of people, of children, of young people, men and women thinking, I don't want to go onto that ship. It's such a narrow hole in the wall. I've been there. But nobody said, there wasn't a single person who said, please welcome white people, come take our people, there they are. So slavery is not only just white upon black, it's black upon black. Black people sold black people into slavery to white people. So when one man devalues another man by saying, I can sell you, when one man devalues another man to say, I can own you, I can capture you, I can imprison you, I can chain you, and I can use you for my financial gain. What are we doing? We're dehumanizing that human being. That's what happened in the slave trade. That's what happened in the transatlantic slave trade. Man was dehumanized. We could do with him whatever we want. And that's why in the Americas, you see it in the films. What do? He's my property. If you do not want to do what I want you to do, no problem. I take out a gun and I say, bang, you're dead. And the man walks away, not thinking anything about it. Why? Because in his mind, his conscience, he's turned his conscience off completely in the sense that he regards that person as not human. So I can do with him whatever I want. He's dehumanized the person. And that's what happens in the abortion case. The one who's carrying out the abortion, the one who's made a decision to abort, has dehumanized the baby in the womb to such a point where they call it merely a clump of cells. As the pro-abortionists have the same view here, that which is within the womb is of no value. It is only a clump of cells. If you kill it, there's no problem. It's only a clump of cells. It has no value. It's not human. Number two, you hear them say, well, it's not alive. It's not alive. Well, we know that's not true. Life begins at conception. And the various stages of growth is what we spoke about this morning. Every medical textbook in the world confirms this. When I got arrested on Wednesday, it'll be 1 year anniversary of my arrest last year for preaching on abortion at the University of Bristol. On Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, my solicitor sent me a message saying, it's 1 year, what are we going to do? So that's how I know it's 1 year. He said to me, when we were preaching there outside the University of Bristol, a man from the science department comes up and says to me, I want to engage with you in conversation. Can I debate you? I said, sir, no problem, certainly. But he said to me, you're going to debate me from the Bible, that's scriptural. I said, okay, let's debate from science. And so we did. And I put the microphone down. I said, I will follow you into the library today, into University of Bristol Library. Show me one medical textbook that says life doesn't begin at conception. What did he do? He stuck his hand out and he shook my hand and he said, you're absolutely right. I said, if I'm absolutely right, why are you siding with the students who are saying that it's absolutely wrong? His answer to me will shock you or may not shock you. He says to me, what else could we do? In other words, you have to go with the flow. Feelings trump facts. Philosophy is made up of men trumps the facts. What are the facts? The facts are this, brothers and sisters in Christ, that life begins at conception. The baby is alive. Though we cannot detect a heartbeat until the 8th or 12th week, the baby is alive and growing with all parts necessary to be a human being. And this is in the image of God. Number 3 is not a person. You may have heard this on Saturday. One of the last women to, one of the last women to step up on Saturday said, it's not a person. You may have heard that if you were standing next to me. It's not a person. What do they mean? It's not a person. There's no personhood. In other words, the baby in the womb can't remember, can't make a decision, can't decide whether they want Cocoa Pops or Cheerios. The baby in the womb can't make a decision for life, can't make any sort of decision. There's no personhood in the baby. Well, even a 1-day-old child, today a baby born in Southmead, let's say a baby born in the last hour, it is now 5 to 12. Let's say a baby born at 5 to 11, the baby's 1 hour old. That baby itself cannot make a decision. That baby cannot decide whether it wants food or doesn't want food. That baby cannot decide whether she wants to drive or not drive. That baby cannot decide whether she's left-wing or right-wing politics. That baby cannot decide whether it wants to be an astronaut or a factory worker. Why? Because it's a baby. But the idea is that baby in the womb is not a person because it cannot decide what it wants to do. We say that the baby conceived at conception is a person. Is a person. In fact, the Bible teaches this. And that God knows that person before the foundation of the world. In the same way God knows you as a believer from before the foundation of the world, God knows every person on the planet from before the foundation of the world. God speaking to Jeremiah in Jeremiah chapter 1 verse 5, what does he say? Before I formed you in the womb. Before I formed you in the womb. Before you were born, I set you apart. That means God knew Jeremiah before Jeremiah's mother and father met each other. God already knew who Jeremiah was. God already knew there would be a baby called Jeremiah. God did not know a clump of cells, but a person who would be called Jeremiah. What's the next one? Well, very simply, they don't love the unborn neighbor because the common mantra, the common theme is it's my body, my choice. My body, my choice. Now, we hear that all the time. We hear that all the time. And if you've been standing with me in the public square, you know how I answer this very simply. Well, we recognize that it's not your body. And women get very upset about this when they say it's not your body. It's a simple biological fact. That no man has a right, no woman has a right to tell another woman what to do with her body. That's a given. No Christian is going to do that. No Christian is going to tell another person what to do with their body. But what we can do is tell somebody what to do about the body within their body. When the woman is pregnant, goes to the doctor, what does the doctor say? Mrs. So-and-so, Miss So-and-so, calls him by the name and says, I can hear another heartbeat. It is not the heartbeat of the mother or the woman. It's a separate heartbeat, a separate body. The woman herself does not have 20 toes. Neither does she have 20 fingers. Therefore, if she says it's my body, she's not saying that my body now has 20 toes and 20 fingers. No, she still has the same amount of toes and fingers. The body within her has separate toes and separate fingers. So we recognize this. It's a ludicrous argument, but understand all of this is covered in evil, divisive plans. They're so consumed by evil that they cannot make sense of common sense. And then when they say it is my body, my choice, we remind them, what is your choice here? Your choice is to murder the unborn child, to be unloving to the unborn neighbor. What is the next one? Well, this one is the question, if you've been standing with me in the public square, is the question that gets asked 99% of the time in the public square. How many times you've stood with me, you've heard this question in the 4 hours that we preach on a Saturday. How many times have you heard this question? Well, what about rape and incest? What about rape and incest? What about rape and incest? And the examples that are given just get, the age gets lower and lower and lower. At one time it was, what about if your 14-year-old daughter gets raped? And then it's like, what about when your 13-year-old daughter gets raped? And then it comes down to, what about your 12-year-old daughter it gets lower and lower. And then they shouted with a whole lot of drama, not just rape, but incest, and your father and your stepfather and your uncle, and they throw all into it. There is no doubt there's evil in the world. There's no doubt there is sin in the world. Man is depraved. Man's heart is evil. It is true that 12-year-old girls get raped. It is true that young girls fall into the sinful trap, the evil of incest. But what is our response to that? Well, you already know. If you've been out following us, what is it that we say as abolitionists? What do we say? That the rapist deserves the death penalty, not the child. The rapist deserves the death penalty, not the child. It is a simple logic. It is a simple explanation. It appeals to anyone with a conscience. And I often say to people, I say to them, let me just give you an example. I say to those who are following us, either online or in the public square, I say, what if I came to you and I said to you, I'm going to charge you for a crime that somebody else did. I'm going to get you to go to prison because of a crime that somebody else did. Or I'm going to get you to go to prison because your father committed a crime. And would that be fair? And they'll say no. Anyone in good conscience will say no. Anyone with a logical mind will say no. I should not be charged. I cannot pay for the crime of somebody else. The conclusion then would be, why would you want the child to pay for the crime of the father? Why would you want the child to pay for the crime of the father? Because that's what the pro-abortionist is looking here for. Because of rape and incest, the child should pay for the crime of the father. My friends, I tell you, this is the question asked all the time. And I will continue to answer it. I have a good team of people around me, including my own dear wife, who will constantly tell me, please continue to answer the question. But those of you that have been standing with me for years, including Sister Ruth, was unable to come out right now, and we so appreciate the time. Grandma Comfort as well, who stood with me outside the abortion clinic as we championed for the rights of the baby to be saved. I've heard me talk about this, and many times I get tired of answering this question. But I get encouraged to continue answering it. Why? Because it's a question that must be answered. Because those who are answering it do not know the answer. They're blinded by their sin. Logic is not part of their life concerning this. Their eyes and their mind is consumed by evil. It is true that the rapist must be punished. And what do we say concerning this? The rapist today will go to His Majesty's prison, will spend the entire day, 3 meals given to the rapist. He has a nice warm cell. He has good clothes to wear, albeit the same clothes every day. I don't know. He gets 3 meals a day. He gets to go to watch a movie. He gets to sign up for a course that he wants to do. He gets to do a degree or a diploma in prison. He gets to have his life because there is no death penalty in the UK for the rapist. But what are we doing? We impose a death penalty on the child who's done nothing. As Christians, we cannot stand for that. That is an injustice. We cannot stand for that. The baby has done nothing wrong. I'm currently reading a book which I highly recommend. I haven't completed it, but I do recommend it. The book is called I Am the Exception. And I found this book because I've been looking for stories. When I preach about this, when I talk about this, I try to find stories who show how young girls who've been raped have kept their babies and have raised their babies. And it's so difficult to find these stories made public. It is my understanding that Reverend Jesse Jackson, the politician from the United States, his mother was, I think, at the age of 13 when she was sexually abused by the neighbor. And she kept the baby. He's Reverend Jesse Jackson, the politician today. I think this WWE wrestler, I do not know what his name is. Similar story. His mother was raped when she was a little kid, and she carried the child. And he's that WWE wrestler. This is the story of Anna Ritchie, who was abused by her stepfather more than once from the age of 12. She first conceived a child at the age of 12. Her first abortion was at the age of 12. She mourns over that child at the age of 12. Her stepfather continued to abuse her. She conceives again, but at 13, she keeps the child. By now, not running, the book tells you, now she doesn't run to the stepfather to say she's pregnant. She runs to the mother and says, I'm pregnant. Mother takes the children away, goes to the police station. Long story short, they arrest the man, they put him in prison. What does she do? She does not abort the child. She says, this is my child. But what about the rape? She says, this is my child. Oh, but he's done this, but this is my child, she says. And she keeps the child. And the story goes on to talk about how she keeps the child. I want to carry this book the next time we're out in the public square. I want to show that there is evidence of people who have kept their children, and though they're victims of rape and incest. Well, you say, what about affordability? We heard that on Saturday. What about affordability? I can't have this child. I got to give this child up. I can't love my neighbor enough because I don't have enough money to love my neighbor enough. I want to give up my child. Affordability. I say to you, my dear friends today, how many of you today, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, how many of you today were born with the silver spoon in your mouth? How many of you today were born into wealthy mansions? How many of you today were born to wealthy parents who gave you everything that you wanted from the time that you were conceived? I say very few of us. Our parents struggled with us. The illustration I gave on Saturday in the public square is that there's a woman in Africa right now who's pregnant. The first thing on her mind is not to abort the child. The first thing on her mind is, where can I grind some maize today? Because I need to eat, because I need to get strong, because I have a child. I'm going to bring a child into this world. We have no problem with affordability in the UK. We have charities upon charities. We have funds upon funds. We have benefits upon benefits that can look after children and families. Affordability is merely an excuse. We can't afford to have children is merely an excuse to kill the child. The next one, number 7, medical conditions. Medical conditions, and well, what happens if the mother is got a serious medical condition? Again, this is not at the top of the statistics concerning abortion. Of the 350 babies that were aborted on Friday, the smallest percentage of them is because of medical anomalies or medical conditions. In the cases of medical conditions where the mother has no choice here, the mother really wants to bring the child into the world, but is faced with the most horrific decision. Do I choose between myself or my baby? That's the worst place you could be. Do I choose between my life or the life that I'm carrying? The mother doesn't want to abort this child, but she's faced with this decision. What do I do? Number 8, we often get asked this, miscarriage. Miscarriage is not the same as abortion. A person who miscarries wants to have a baby. And through a set of circumstances, medical conditions, the uterine wall not being strong enough to hold the placenta, and so forth, you end up with a miscarriage. But that's not the same as abortion. Number 9, it is legal to have an abortion, therefore have an abortion. It is legal to have an abortion, therefore have an abortion. It is true, it is legal in the United Kingdom to have an abortion. I just gave you that a few minutes ago, right up until the 23rd week. It is legal. But I say this to you today, and I've said it to you before, listen very carefully. Even if something is legally right, it doesn't make it morally right. What example do we use of that? At one point in the world, at one point in this United Kingdom, it was legally right to own a slave. When the Christians said to the slave owners, this is wrong. How can you own a slave? The slave owner said, I'm only obeying the law. The law says I can own a slave. And the Christians said, the abolitionists said, yes, even if it's legally right, it is not morally right. It's the same position we hold today. Yes, it is legal, your legal right to have an abortion. But it is not morally right to have an abortion. Our laws have been created to promote evil. Look at me very quickly. I don't have time. My time is quickly gone. Look at me very quickly. I want to introduce these two scriptures which I haven't in the past. These two particular scriptures. So if you've been following me for the many years on this will be new for you. Isaiah 10. Let's look at Isaiah 10 very quickly. Look at Isaiah 10 and just the first two verses of Isaiah 10. So this is for those who have heard me before on this, but this I'm bringing in new today. Isaiah 10 verse 1 to verse 2. Let's quickly read. What does it say? Woe to those. The woe is the judgment here. Whenever you see the woe, it's judgment. Judgment to those. Woe to those who enact evil statutes and those who constantly record unjust decisions. And what is the purpose of their evil acts? To enact their evil statutes. The evil statutes are evil laws. Woe to them who carry out these evil laws, and those who constantly record unjust decisions of the law, so as to deprive the needy of justice and rob the poor of my people of their rights, so that widows may be their spoil, and that they may plunder the orphans. In other words, woe to those who come up with such laws that oppress the needy, that take away the rights of the innocent. Woe to them. Judgment is coming for them. So even though there's a law that exists, we need to warn them. Woe unto you, United Kingdom. Why? Because you've created a law that deprives justice for the child. That deprives justice for the child. As I told one young lady on Saturday, I said, you want to kill the child in the womb? Listen, this week I said, how many young girls have you killed in the womb today? That could have been, who knows, the next person that cured cancer. How many of those children could have been the next entrepreneur that did something phenomenal, or the next school teacher, or the next nurse in the world, or the next Nobel Prize winner? You don't know that, but you've killed them. Why? Because your law has allowed you to do that. Concerning this law, look with me very quickly at the next one that I'll bring in the book of Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes is after Proverbs. And in the book of Ecclesiastes, what do we read here? In chapter 8, just follow with me quickly, I'm running out of time. In Ecclesiastes chapter 8, and I want to show you one particular verse here that's important for us to keep in mind even as we engage in our public preaching and respond to the law and the accusations that come and the threats of arrest and persecution and so forth, and where we stand on this. Look at it. Ecclesiastes chapter 8 and verse 11 says, because the sentence against an evil deed is not executed quickly, therefore the hearts of the sons of men among them are given fully to do evil. Let me read that again to you very quickly. Because the sentence against the evil deed is not executed quickly, because there isn't a judgment against the evil deed quickly, because the law is not acting quickly against the evil deed. You follow that? Because the law of the land is not quick to say, hey, that's wrong. Not only is it wrong, we're gonna come after you, we're gonna arrest you, we're gonna imprison you, we're gonna criminalize this, we're gonna take you to court, we're gonna imprison you. Because that is not quick. Therefore, the hearts of the sons of men among them are given fully to do evil, because the law is slow to prosecute murderers of children. The hearts of men continue swiftly to do evil. Number 10, the next one, I'm coming to a close. Number 10, I'm not a woman. We've heard this many times. I'm not a woman, therefore I should not be speaking. I'm not a woman. This is a woman's choice. Well, it's really very simple. If you support dolphins, do you have to be a dolphin in order to support dolphin? If you support whales in the ocean, do you have to be a whale to support whales? No, I'm a human being trying to champion the cause and love my unborn human being in the womb. I have every right to do that. Number 11, this growing reason. It's a sick reason, an evil reason. You hear it through the mouth of little children who we mourn for, we lament over their souls because they think they know it all. They know so little. This word comes out of their mouth. It's a parasite. It's a parasite. It's a parasite to say, the most awful way to describe the unborn child as a parasite. And these words, parasite, has grown exponentially over the years. It never used to be that way. We never used to hear people call an unborn child a parasite. I'm talking to people today from various age groups here today. Did you ever hear in your past parents talk about their children as a parasite? Did you hear your grandparents talk about their children as a parasite? Did you ever hear in your social, cultural groups anyone talk about a child as a parasite? But now we have children growing in this country talking about the unborn child as a parasite. Well, why do they say that? Because they say that the parasite is dependent upon a host. That this clump of cells cannot live without the mother. Therefore, it's a parasite. It's leaching. It's draining on the mother. It gets far more worse, and I can take another sermon to tell you how women concerning this are so evil that just the other day, a woman is championing that women should get paid for breastfeeding their children. It's a big thing we're doing, breastfeeding. It takes up all of our time. Therefore, we should get paid by the government for breastfeeding our children. This is the evil that prevails in the world today. It is true that a baby in the womb cannot survive without the mother. It is true that the baby in the womb is dependent upon the mother. In a similar way, in the same way, a baby born now in Southmead Hospital is dependent upon the mother for breast milk, is dependent upon the nurses to be taken care of, is dependent upon the doctors to check that the heartbeat is right. Mankind is always dependent upon each other because God never designed us or created us to be an island. We are dependent upon each other. We come into this world depending on each other, and we leave this world depending on each other. Number 12, it's not a baby, it's a fetus. It's not a baby, it's a fetus. Again, you've heard me respond to this. Fetus means small child. And again on Saturday, like you heard us preach, the woman says, well, it's not a baby, it's a fetus. We say, what is fetus? They don't know what a fetus is. Fetus is a Latin word for small child, offspring of a human. So when you say you're aborting, you're killing a fetus, what are you really saying? You're killing a small child, you're killing the offspring of a human. I'll give you just one more and then we'll close. 13, this is number 13 I think. I've got a few more but I won't give it to you. Number 13, there's no heartbeat before 8 weeks, therefore we can kill the baby. Oh, you say there's heartbeat at 8 weeks? Say yes. Detectable heartbeat at 8 weeks. Or because there's no heartbeat before 8 weeks, then we can kill the baby before the 8th week because there's no heartbeat. It's a ludicrous position. It's a ludicrous position. This week, Facebook reminded me that on Thursday, last Thursday, My heart almost stopped beating. Facebook reminded me that I had a heart attack 6 years ago on Thursday, that my heart almost stopped beating. If my heart almost stopped beating, would the people around me not have tried to resuscitate me? We would. Why? It's a human being with value. But there's no heartbeat. Leave him alone. There's no heartbeat. That's the point they're making here. The baby has no heartbeat. Kill it. Kill the baby. There's no heartbeat. I was saying, if a human being's heart stopped beating right now, do we leave them alone? No. We resuscitate them. Get a heartbeat. Even if the person dies, this resuscitation doesn't work, the person dies. There's no heartbeat. You can't detect anything. Is the funeral that of a human being? Yes. This is a human being that has died. We recognize it's a human being, created in the image of God, our neighbor who has just died. The idea that there's no heartbeat before 8 weeks is a reason to kill the child is sinful. My conclusion today, as I come to the end today, is this: we teach that every person who has not loved the unborn child by murdering them, by carrying out an abortion, is guilty of murder. Is guilty of murder. Where there is murder, there must be a murderer. Where there is murder, there must be a murderer. And the Bible says in 1 Corinthians that no murderer will inherit the kingdom of God. Therefore, my friends, if you've not stood with me, with our team in the public square, stand with us and preach with us and hand out tracts with us and have conversations with us. Why? Here's number one: because I want to love my neighbors. Who are we loving? Number one, the unborn baby is my neighbor. The unborn child is my neighbor. Number two, the person who has carried out the abortion is still my neighbor as well. Do you get that? They're still my neighbor too. The mother who made the decision to have the abortion is my neighbor. The physician at Mary Stopes and BPAS and NHS who was carrying out that abortion, who put the gloves on and put the surgical tool and gave the saline solution, who committed the act of murder, is still my neighbor. The husband, the boyfriend who drove the girl to the abortion clinic, and I've seen it with my own eyes. A man drives his girlfriend to the abortion clinic. I'm standing there and I'm watching him and I'm preaching and I'm saying to him, "Sir, why did you bring your baby here to this clinic?" And he tells me, "You don't know, I'm a student. I can't afford to have this child." Guess what he was doing? He was polishing his Mercedes-Benz while he's talking to me. His Mercedes-Benz. And he tells me he can't afford to look after the child. So I want to love my neighbor, the unborn. And I want to love the ones who has committed the act of abortion. How do I love them? Firstly, how do I love the unborn neighbor? By recognizing how I need to stand up for my unborn neighbor. My unborn neighbor cannot stand up for himself or herself. I need to stand up for him. Therefore, as a Christian, I'm an abolitionist. I want to make sure that I want to abolish abortion completely. Number two, I want to stand up for my neighbor who's committed the abortion. How can I stand up for them? I want to stand up for them by proclaiming the gospel to them, by saying there's forgiveness for you in Jesus Christ and Jesus Christ alone. That you see the baby who you killed is in heaven right now. And you can see that baby again by asking God to forgive you of your sin. That you too could be in heaven, could enter the kingdom and be with that child. I want to love my neighbors, both my neighbors, the unborn child and the one who seeks to harm and murder the unborn child. Jesus says we have to love our neighbors. Who is my neighbor today? I made it very clear. I am to love the unborn child who is my neighbor. And I am to love the one who is committing the act of trying to kill the unborn child. We'll go into the Lord's Supper, and I've taken 5 minutes of Brother Augie's time. I'm sure he'll try to